Hello everyone. I am now just waiting on Maha to join us today. Kind of what her experience was like having an eating disorder and kind of see where the conversation takes us from there.
Hi, Anoova. You can see me,
Hello.
right?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
okay?
How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you so much. Yes.
Great. So, yeah, as I was saying, we're just joined by, again, Maha from Islam and Eating Disorders, and today we're just going to go a little bit into kind of what her experience was like and the differences, I think, maybe from switching between living in the UK and Pakistan, and then kind of how that affected your experience.
Mhm.
So to
Thank
start, I
you,
mean, is there
Anoova, and
anything? Yeah.
thank you so much for your invitation, and thank you so much for what you did last time with us.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really great session, and people really benefited. So I really wanted to thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And with my illness did manifest and did start from UK, and my recovery and healing ultimately happened in Pakistan. And the difference was when I was in Pakistan, I wasn't really aware of any body image issues, nothing. It was only when I was living in UK and I was exposed to media and I was exposed to many things. And in my teenage years, I got this thought in my head. And it only grew stronger when I was in UK. We have a system of GCSEs. I was about to do my GCSEs when it really like kind of got strong, but it was still under control because I was more of a person who was more studious, and I was really focused on my academia side. But when I was in my college, it became really strong. And it was then I was on holidays. When I was 16, I was on holidays in Pakistan. And when all of a sudden I was kind of, the whole idea that I had body image issues became really strong. And from there it grew really strong. And so yes, and then when I went back to UK, it was on a completely different level. My illness was, and I have to say, Anuva, every year that I spent with my mind and what was going through my mind, my illness did become more and more strong. And to the point, you won't believe it, when you think you have achieved everything in your life and it's your time to step out and take charge of the destiny. That's when everything came crashing down on me, because I was so the hiding of the illness did last for a long time, but then all of a sudden everything caught up with me, like the mind and the physical sides and the psychological side was really extreme. The effects were really bad. And I have shared this many times that I was forced into. I had to go into the treatment because I was so sick, and in UK, when they send you into the treatment, it means that medically you are deteriorating and your life needs to be saved. That's when the intervention happens, and with me this is what happened. And I was yes, so I went into the treatment.
And so you had moved to the UK in your teenage years. Was that solely for academics, or I think it might help put things into perspective a little bit
Yeah.
to just
So I was born
understand the
in
timeline.
UK. Yes, I was born in UK. I lived in UK till I was five, and then we migrated to Pakistan. So I was living in Pakistan, and then I was 11 years old when I went back to UK to study, and then I was constantly shifting between the two countries. But I did I did spend consecutive like from the age of 13 till my university. I was in UK for a consecutive period of time.
Okay, I see. And
Yes.
the living styles between the two countries, what would you
Mhm.
say stood out to you the most? Both
I
in
think
terms
in
of aggravating your eating disorder and just like separate from that
I
as
think when I was in Pakistan, the life was more free.
well.
We had more freedom in Pakistan. There was more freedom. I mean, you were really living your childhood, and you were living with your friends. I mean, everything was open. You had more freedom. But whereas when we when I was in UK, life was very, very restricted. The freedom was less because we were living in a foreign country, and we were in and our parents were really, really careful because there was a lot of you could say that the culture of Islamophobia was kind of there. We were one of the marginalized communities, and when my father was living in UK, they did face a lot of racism.
Mm,
So our parents, everybody was very careful. But plus in UK, we didn't have a culture of us hanging out with our friends on streets or anything. But whereas in Pakistan, there was more freedom. You could collaborate with your friends, you could go out, you could do many, many things. But in UK, everything was like restricted to indoors. And even on the weekends, when you do go out, you were always with a family member. So I think there was a
mm,
huge difference between the freedom. In UK, it was like, freedom. But in Pakistan, there was a lot of freedom.
mm. That's an interesting point to make up, and I think I can relate to that quite a bit. Like my parents will always say how in Bangladesh they would just walk around the streets with their friends, but here in the US, at least I really never experienced that. And it may just be like where my house is located and the types of people that I live around. But that is something I've noticed as well, just in my life in the US, as opposed to the people I see in Bangladesh and how much more simple it is to enjoy time with friends. For me, it was never that simple. It never felt very easy. It always felt very planned out and like structured. So there wasn't that spontaneous lifestyle that you could live.
I think I can completely understand Anuva. Like when I was in Pakistan, there was a lot of happiness. Things were very simple. Like even when you're going to school, you're in a group. You're together. When you're coming back, you're together. The neighborhood is like your family. Everyone looks after you. Everyone is like is your auntie. Everyone is uncle.
Mm,
Everyone is like a family. But in UK, it's impossible. I mean, especially, I mean, we were. I think I was quite privileged because we were still living in a very kind of a Pakistani kind of area. But whereas my auntie, my father's sister, lived in a very kind of a British area, there were hardly any Pakistanis there, and there was absolutely no way that you would experience any kind of a warmth. And another stark difference between living in Pakistan and UK was a very kind of a dark environment. But whereas Pakistan was full of light, and there was a lot of sunshine, and there was a lot of light, you could feel the
mm,
light, you could feel the golden light. But whereas UK, the skies and the atmosphere was always very kind of a sad.
mm,
There was a lot of melancholy in the air, and you could really feel that everyone it was not really, really happy. The mood was always like very serious and very somber. I mean, there was no happiness in the UK, and I'm not talking about my house. The house is your secure environment. I mean, outside, you could really feel that there was not much happiness. Everybody was like really straight faced, and like you were always on a guard. Yes,
mm,
and
mm,
I think this was one of the, I mean, I would say the contributing factors towards my sadness when I was in UK, because I mean, as a young person who was born there, who kind of lived there in and out, but I could really feel the difference between the light and the darkness, that the UK was full of darkness and dark energies, and but whereas Pakistan was kind of full of very kind of a light energy and a lot of freedom and a lot of happiness. And and I remember, I mean, and you still, Anuva, you know, you don't have a choice. You kind of adapt, you accept. I don't know what it is, but you know, you kind of force yourself to accept the environment and to accept the people like you. And then I think the transition of trying to fit in, that, you know, those people, they don't fit in with you, but you're kind of trying to fit in with them and trying to be like them. And I think it really compromises a lot on your personality and a lot on who you are as a person and on your heritage as well and what you come from. So I think there was a lot of sacrifice which was made.
You mean between moving countries and I suppose just in general living um, and trying to adjust
I
to
think
different
living
environments.
in UK, yes, I think in
Yeah.
living in UK was like, I always felt I was compromising on who I was. We were
Yeah.
compromising on our culture because we were always like trying to adapt. We
Hmm.
were trying to be like people who like even physically we could not be like. And even though they do say that it's a melting pot, but I still remember we were constantly on the edge because in school there was a big division between the people who were Asians and who were not Asians, and the language was different. Even though we spoke the language was not a barrier, but you could always tell, you know, the difference between who you were and who those people were. And then, you know, in order to fit in with the society, you were always, you know, trying to change yourself and be like them. You're making the compromise on the language, you're making the compromise on your family dynamics, you're making the compromise on the food and everything. And then, I mean, of course, what you're exposed to, it's like the hours spent in school with those people and the hours spent in college. You take everything in, and then you kind of try to change yourself. And of course, I mean, you know, if you are spending so many hours in that environment, then you try to be like them. And the difference was huge. I mean, it was a stark difference, and I think that really like the multiple identities you were living with. I mean, who are you? Are you Pakistani? Okay, if you're Pakistani, but then you're speaking this language, and deep down, you know, you're trying to be like the British, but then you're not British because you don't look like them. And even though you are the minority community, but then are you fully accepted by them? And you know that deep down you were not accepted by the general society. And then, of course, the history plays a huge part when you were studying the history in school and with the colonization, what happened. There was a big shock that when we were colonized, they never became like us. You know, they forced the billions of people to become like a few hundred people.
Hmm.
And when you have to accept that reality, the how our language was changed and how what they did to us, and I think it really like you think, okay, you know, it really does play a part, especially Anuva, if you are someone who's very who doesn't take things on the face value and who's researching and looking for the answers. So I think it really plays up with your mind and everything, and your identity and everything becomes really compromised. And I think it was, you know, trying to adapt and fit in. And I think when the illness and everything started, and the healing only started in Pakistan because I was in such a bad place. I was in a very, very bad place in my life. And when I came here, all of a sudden I saw the sunshine and I thought, you know what? Um, yeah, it really like the light, energy, the people, it kind of really helped me to not be under the pressure to be like someone who I didn't want to be, but I still was trying to be like.
Hmm.
Yes.
See. And would you say like this trying to fit in into a group that maybe you weren't able to identify with very much? Did that play a role in the development of your experience with an eating disorder? Or how did that kind of affect the progression of that, and if it did, um,
Yeah,
what kind
it
of
did.
was the
It
association
did.
there? It
I
did.
think it was, yes, yeah, it did. And I think the way it did, I was very comfortable when I would go to Pakistan because I would feel that, even though it was a developing country, it was a poor country, it's something, where everyone, you belong. They do say, even though I wasn't born in Pakistan, but they do say that um, the earth has a connection with you, and you
Mm-hmm.
always feel the pull towards your heritage. And then at the same time, I mean, UK was seen as a land of opportunity. There was a reason why our forefathers migrated there for the better opportunities. And I think somehow I knew there was something wasn't right about living there. And I really felt it. And it's really strange. I felt that something wasn't right when I was 11. I remember that. And then, I mean, when you're trying to brush the thought aside, and then you're like, no, you know what? I'm here, my whole family's here, and I need to fit in, I need to accept. I mean, and I think forcing myself to accept that I'm British and I have to be like British, it really compromised on our personality and on our culture. For example, I'll give you an example. When you go to Pakistan, you, of course, you dress differently, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Even though things are different now. But when you're in UK, all of a sudden you wanted to dress the way the society dresses, yes? And even though there was a religious barrier to how you dress, you have to be, the modesty was a key element in how you dress. I mean, but still your outfits were completely like the way the British outfits were. And the only reason was, Anuva, because you wanted to fit in with the general society. You didn't want it to stand out. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the food played a huge part. And then I think your personality, the changes in the personality, because you were exposed to the media and you were watching the media, which was mainly mainstream American. And you had such an influence from that media that you were always thinking, okay, the reality is what is being shown in the media. And so there was a lot of confusion with that. And I think for me, I would have to say that because I really tried to change myself. And at one point, I really wanted to let go of the culture. I didn't want to associate with the culture. And I just, wanted to be this independent and, kind of a modern feminist person. And in order to make those, like, that the life was all about the freedom, it was all about the progression, going forward and achieving your dreams, like they say, the American dream, which is, and I was really focused on that. But obviously, the reality was completely different. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what really like changed me as a person was the events of 9/11, which happened in America. I mean, that's the first time I was exposed to Islam as a religion, and I was exposed to who we were, because all of a sudden our country was in the middle of the whole what was happening in America. And I think, Anuva, you were not even born at that time. This was like zillion years ago. And honestly, I still remember all of a sudden, whether it doesn't matter whether you want to be Pakistani or you don't want to be Muslim, you were a Muslim. We were labeled as Muslims. And there was so much negativity in the media about the Muslims that we were forced to look into it, who we were and who we were as a people. And I think that was like what really shook my foundation. And I thought, okay, you know what is Islam? Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I as a person? And it really made me, forced me into studying and looking into everything. And I think that really impacted me, especially with what happened in Afghanistan, because this is like right next door to my country. And when Afghanistan was invaded by like 100 countries which united and bombed the country, I think that was a big shock because all the refugees were coming into our country. And I think looking into that, helplessness and people like who don't even know the world map and what was happening to them was a big shock. I mean, I know it's very easy to pretend, okay, it wasn't happening, but I was the kind of a person who really noticed everything. I mean, I'm a person who noticed at the age of 11 that something about UK wasn't right, that UK was just, there was so much darkness in the UK and there was no happiness there. So imagine when something is happening right next door to you and you pretend, oh, you know what? No, it's not happening. So I think those events really forced me into studying everything, and I think it really played on my mind. The more I looked into the history with what happened in like Pakistan, what happened in Afghanistan. And I remember being 16, 17 and standing in college at the seminar and speaking about like the invasion of Afghanistan. And I remember someone said to me, why don't you go back to your country? Why don't you? And I said to them, I said, yeah, I will go back to my country if you just get out of Middle East and leave us alone. And I said, I leave. I said, I'll leave UK if you leave Middle East. And he goes, we have nothing to do with Middle East. I said, you have everything to do with Middle East. I said, you're occupying our territories. You're occupying our countries. I said, leave the Middle East and we'll leave UK. And I remember that was the first answer which came to my mind when he confronted me. And I said, I was born in this country, and this person is telling me, leave UK and go back to your country. And I said, what about you guys? I said, your army is stationed in our countries, and you're not leaving, and you're making these excuses that you're there for on a peace mission. And I said, you're simply there for oil and all these reasons. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a very, very difficult time. I mean, they were constantly, and the politics played a huge part, because the more, Anuva, I went into studying the political side, the international politics side, the more my mind was conflicted, and I was so compromised on what was happening. And I didn't realize, but by the time I finished my master's, the illness had gotten to the stage where I was literally dying. And yeah, and I would never say that I had an issue with the food, but that it did become an issue. And yes,
I see. So there were like many different factors that kind of played a role in how you experienced this. So it wasn't necessarily just social media or just body image. It was very, I mean, of course, with everything, this was very complex
I think what
progression.
happened, Anuva, it started off with the body image issue
Okay.
at the age of 15. Yes, it did. I mean, but then um, as I went to the college, I mean, I told you I was a very, very, very ambitious person, and I would never ever deny that I had a genius mind. I was very, very, very ahead of my time.
Okay.
Like, let's say if you compared my intellect with people who were with me, I was 10 years ahead of them when it came to the intellect, and when it came to the mind and the brain. I would never ever deny that. I mean, I was someone, even at the age of 11, 12, 13, who was constantly studying and studying extra. I knew nearly everything. I mean, I was so hungry for the knowledge. I wanted to know everything about the world. I was curious. But yes, it initially started off with, the body image issue, not fitting in, trying to fit in, trying to be like the white person, denying the brown heritage, the Asian heritage, and trying to like really be like a British or American, you could say. And then all of a sudden, the wake up call was when 9/11 happened, and it was a wake up call. I remember our families were petrified. You will go out. What if you get attacked? And then and the racism. I mean, in the Britain. I mean, I don't know how to explain it to you, but uh, there were race riots in Britain once upon a time. And I remember like looking at those race riots, and I thought to myself, but when we came here, we gave a lot to this country. My grandfather, I mean, he was a very hardworking person. He made a lot of contribution. He died in UK. And I said, what are we doing? Where are we trying to make a difference? And this like when you don't understand when somebody tells you that you're Paki. This is a racist word they would use in UK, and go back to your country. I swear it really hurts you, because you think to yourself, and then to tell them, no, but I'm British. There was no way. And then when 9/11 happened, I think it was a wake-up call, because not just culturally but religiously, from the religion, that you were born with an identity, and your first identity was that you were born as a Muslim. So I think that was like really a shock. And the more I studied, the more my mind was so conflicted. Like I couldn't understand that I'm living in a country which is telling the whole world how you need to be a democracy and how you need to be a practicing democracy. And I said, and I couldn't understand how could they do this?
Mm-hmm.
Like it just didn't make sense that in UK we have a zero tolerance policy. I'm sure you do in America as well. That you zero tolerance is if you're in a doctor's office,
Mm-hmm.
you cannot use abusive language, you cannot be violent. They will have a zero tolerance policy. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't understand that what happened to this zero tolerance policy when it came to the poor countries of the world. Why were they bombed, without any reason? And why everybody was not equal in international law. So I
Right.
think it did, and especially the issue of Palestine. I mean, it was always there. I mean, how can this be justified? And then, I mean, the more the world was invaded, the more the countries got bombed, which were related to my side, like my religion, the more I was conflicted. I mean, when I saw what happened in Lebanon, and especially when you're visiting, like when I was in Lebanon, I couldn't believe it, Anuva, like going and witnessing those places which were bombed. And yes, and how the certain countries of the world, which are like we are the policemen, we are the Security Council of the world, we are the protectors of the world. It really, 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 really like plays with your mind. And the more you think about it, that what is going to be the solution, of the world problems. And then the more you're exposed to the hypocrisy, the more conflicted you become. And honestly, it's something like it's very difficult to accept. And when I did become really, really sick,
Mm-hmm.
I knew one thing was I gave up on my career path, on the United Nations and the peace mission. I simply decided to accept what was happening in the world, and I decided to live with my illness. I became more focused on my illness, trying to lose weight, and that's all. I just wouldn't even focus on what was happening in the world. And that time, Syrian war was happening. But then, of course, there was a wake-up call when I had to like get well, and I had to like really address what was affecting me and what was really, really like um, conflicting me. And so, yes.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think Islam kind of played a role in that? You've mentioned a couple times to me that it really helped you heal and it helped in the recovery process more than any treatment center was able to,
Yeah.
or any of the food that they used to give you helped.
I
So
mean,
I'm kind of just curious what role it played.
I think, Anu, I told you I was a very, very, very intelligent
Yeah.
person. I was ahead of everything. So when my illness came and I did dive into my eating disorder, it was full on dive. It wasn't that, I was contemplating how deep I am going to go into this illness. I really went deep. And by deep, I mean, I by the time I realized I was sick, I was willing to die for this illness. There was in no way. I mean, when we were speaking last time and you were
Mm-hmm.
explaining and we were speaking about your family, how your mother felt and how your father felt, I tell you, my parents were literally begging me to live. My mother was crying, like a day wouldn't go by when she wouldn't beg me to live and to give up on my illness. And my father, who was a very, very strong man, I mean, he one day he said to his niece, and he said, "You know what? I just want God to take everything away from me, but just give me my daughter back." And the problem was, like, nothing was impacting me, nothing. And if you think that the British doctors were able to convince me that I need to live, I just wouldn't. And I knew about the psychology side. I knew about the illness side. I was studying the illness, and there was something which was so horrible, which was so bad and evil about this illness that I couldn't break out of it. I just wouldn't. I simply wouldn't. And it doesn't matter. I had like, because I was living in England, in UK, I had English friends. It doesn't matter how much they try to convince me that I have such a bright future because they saw me as a very bright person. I simply wouldn't. I mean, this is it. And I swear, I mean, to this day, I don't understand why I was willing to die for this illness, and I was. It doesn't matter how many times people told me it's a suicide, no like mantra, whether it came from the Islamic point of view, whether it was from my family, whether it was a begging or the crying by my mother. it just wouldn't impact me. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. No one made a difference. I was so deep into my illness, and the change happened when I was in the treatment center, and they simply wouldn't make, like, there was no progress was being made, like forcing someone to eat. You know, when you are threatening them that with a feeding tube, like, you understand. Of course, I had more brain. I decided to eat, but everything was monitored. I mean, I was my meals were monitored, so I was eating. But deep down, I knew the minute I leave this facility, I was definitely going to go back onto my original ways. I was going to go back into my eating disorder. I swear this is the reality. So they were, and even those psychological exercises about my family and the therapy, the CBT, everything was fading. I had zero interest. I had zero interest in healing. I had zero interest in everything. And how religion came in, because I got to the point where I was in a lot of pain. And when I left the hospital, I came out, I realized, because cognitively I was functioning a bit okay. And I remember I went back to London. And when I went back to London to do this internship as a volunteer, because like, I couldn't get a paid job. And I remember the map of the world had changed, like the Middle East, North African Association, MENA had dissolved. There was Jasmine Revolution, which happened in Tunisia. There was a revolution in Tunisia, which spread to no, not Egypt. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot happening in the Muslim world, and things were changing, and the map of the world had kind of changed. Yes. And there was a
Mm-hmm.
Syrian war which was happening and everything. And I thought, oh my God, so much has changed. And what happened to me? And that's when I remember one of my psychiatrists, because he couldn't make any progress with me. And they kept on threatening me. And he said, you know what, your soul needs healing. And that's when, I thought, okay, I need to try. Like, at least I can try. So that's when I tried, and I looked into the Islam side, and I looked into the healing and everything, and that's when the change started happening. Yeah, so I have to give the whole credit to the like, when I started praying, and I wouldn't say it made a difference in the beginning. There was no difference was made, but as I told you, I was a very ambitious person. Like, when I dived into the eating disorder, it was like full on. You go full into the eating disorder. So when I decided to make switch to the Islamic side, I became interested. I started studying, and then I did find a religious mentor from the India, and I was very, very lucky. He accepted me as a student, and I started meditating. Very, very, very slow progress, but I thought, my God, there is no way I'm failing in this. So I went on and on and on, and the more like I was meditating, the more like I was kind of reading the Quran and I was praying, my mind started shifting. So there was no therapist involved. There was no one there to dictate to me what to eat and what not to eat. Slowly, my mind, like the darkness in my mind lifted, my sleep improved, and the depression went. Like, the whole melancholy side, where the world was a very dark place, it became a light place. And then I think I told you that in 2015 I went to Egypt. No, I went to Turkey,
Mm-hmm.
Turkey. And when I was in Turkey, I met the Syrian people and the Syrian refugees, and that's when my life changed. So yes.
Yeah, I think it provides a lot of insight into like how we don't need to rely necessarily on such like medical treatments, especially if we don't have access to that. Like just trying to pull from my own experience, and like going to a therapist, I don't believe would have helped me. I think it would have just made me more entrenched in the disorder. It would have made me more angry than I already was. So, I'm, were there any emotions that I think that you would like to talk about? I guess it's really certainly up to you, in the comparison between when you were in the treatment center and then when you turned kind of to religion instead as a way of overcoming the illness that was significant.
When I was in when I was in the treatment center, everything was so calculated and so organized.
Mm-hmm.
I know you would never have survived, yeah. because you're forced in. You're like made to do things against your will, yeah. And they say in Islam there is like one prayer which my teacher told me was always pray that Allah's will becomes your will, God's will becomes your will, and Allah is happy with you and pleased with you. And when I was there, and I hate being told what to do. I really don't like it when I'm told like this is what you need to do. Like please don't take this in a wrong way that in my family I was like no, it's my way or no way. Of course it wasn't like that, but in like when I was studying the international relations and conflict, I hated the fact that these people who have nothing to do with our religion and our culture would come into our country, because I was I don't want to talk about that delegation, but when I was doing my internship, we visited one country in the Middle East. And when we went there, we were simply telling them how they need to be, like how they need to be like us and follow the British way. And, and
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't like this fact that, telling other countries how they should live and how they should be, because I think every culture needs to be like accepted, every nation needs to be accepted for their unique heritage and their individuality. Like every person needs to be accepted for who they are. But when you are in a therapy, what happens? I mean, you think the therapist is your BFF, and this is like million of years ago, and you're sitting there, and the way the questions were, they're always looking into the family, that something is wrong in your childhood. And I'm being very, very honest. And you're forced into like thinking, okay, my mother wasn't like that, my father wasn't like that, X, Y wasn't like that, Y, like simple things which help you to become strong in life, which like have no necessary connection with the trauma. It becomes related, and it turns into something which becomes like traumatic experience. I don't know how to explain it to you. Like they were like simple things which were taken out of context, yes, and were turned into something which was like very negative. So you do turn against your family, yes. But whereas when I did found this teacher in India, and I started meditating, Anoova, I will be very honest with you. My God, um, he never once said to me that this is how you should be. This is what you need to do. I mean, because he simply told me you need to start meditating, because I was a very edgy person. I was constantly on the edge. I'll give you an example. When I was in eating disorder center, I couldn't sleep. And I told them I can't sleep. I simply couldn't sleep. And they were like, oh, but your metabolic rate has changed. There's so much energy. And I was like, but I'm not sleeping. And then they would give me all these pills and nothing was working on me. Like, and one day my mother said, my mother had given up everything to come to the UK to be with me. And she was simply sleeping with me at night. She had given up so much. And guess what? I was up all night.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would walk into the center with this disordered mind, and I would tell them, and they would be like, no, take this pill, take that pill. And then we made a decision that I don't want to be on medication anymore because it doesn't help. And it wasn't helping. But when I was like on the path of Islam and I was praying, I remember my teacher said to me, he said, Anuva, I did get to the stage where I was so bad. I was so bad that I just didn't see any hope. And that's when I got the hope. And how my mind changed naturally, automatically. In my mind, I was guided to do the right things. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to live a life which was good. And another thing was I didn't want it to be controlled by anything. Like in my mind, I didn't want anyone to dictate to me that this is how I should be living my life. And I thought there is so much in my life to do. And I don't want to waste my life thinking about this illness. There is a contribution which needs to be made in the world. I mean, there is a reason why Allah created me. Every single person is a vicegerent on the earth. And I think, this is what like really, really guided me through. And even with the food choices and everything, you're naturally guided. You want to do well. And I'll give you a simple example. Like my connection with the Quran was zero. Like I didn't even know how to read the Quran properly. And when I did started meditating and I was doing all this, I remember one of the biggest miracles of my life was I had a Quran teacher from Pakistan. and she was making zero progress with me. And for years, we were stuck on the first chapter of the Quran. And I mean it, I just couldn't get it right. I couldn't do it. And then guess what happened? I ended up memorizing the longest surah of the Quran, which is the 280 verses, 288 verses, sorry. And 280 verses are the second surah of the Quran. And when that happened, I realized the power of the mind. And I knew if I wanted to progress further on this path, my mind needs to be very, very healthy. And there are certain foods which I need to consume for the intellectual side. So I think that was, and I know that what made a difference in my path of spirituality was taking the right diet at the time, which is like before the first prayer of the morning. Is called the time of Tahajjud in Islam. It's yeah. So if you get up at that time, Anoova, in order to function, your mind and your body needs to be very, very healthy, and you do need to consume a certain diet to get through that period of praying and then going towards the first prayer of the day. So yes, so and slowly it happens. I can never say, like when I resolved my issues, what was inside me when the healing happened. And Alhamdulillah, I have to say one thing. I don't think so for years. I've experienced a single dark thought, or I have gone through the depression. So many big calamities fell on our family. So many things happened, and I saw my strength and how I went forward. And there was not a day when I relapsed or I went back into my illness, or I had, sleepless nights, or I was depressed, or I was thinking that world is a dark place. I always thought, no, there is so much we can do and we can rise above everything. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's just amazing to see how that was what really pushed you through this and helped you overcome this in your own way instead of relying on methods that may not have worked, just depending on who you are. So it's very valuable to understand that perspective and just uh, have that input be present on the internet so that others can maybe take from that and use it to their advantage instead of going a route that they may not believe is best for them, but is what may seem like the only option. So there's always a way
I
to kind
think,
of tailor
yeah,
your own recovery journey to yourself rather than trying to follow other
exactly.
people's journeys and then it not apply to your situation. So,
I think Anuva, another reason why I started this website was, I mean, I think I explained to you, like, when I was willing to die for this illness, I didn't want to live. And I thought there is no way I achieved this weight loss with so much determination. I made so many sacrifices to get to the stage where I was dying, and I said, there is no way I'm not gaining any weight. Like, how difficult that process is when they're telling you you need to get to the certain weight, and you're like, there is no way, because I got to this weight with so much hard work. There is no way my efforts are going to waste. I'd rather die than do what they are telling me to do. And I was in a very, very bad place. And I did isolate, myself from the whole family. Like there was no way, there was nothing anyone could do. When someone has made a decision to go down that destructive path, and they're crying, they're begging you to live, and you don't want to live, and you are in a very bad place. And when I did come out of the hospital and I kind of relapsed, I remember I was in a very, very bad place where my mother even gave up. And this is before I went to Turkey, when I met the Syrian people, and I had to change. I changed because I remember there was one boy I met when I was in Turkey, and he had lost his legs in war in Aleppo. When Syria was bombed and Aleppo was bombed, he woke up and I knew he had no legs, and he was only 7. And when I met him, and I remember with this disordered mind, like I had no interest. I swear this person was explaining to me about the Syria and the crisis of the refugees, and I was so mentally dead. I had, like, there were no emotions. I felt nothing. Like I had no interest in, in the genocide, what was happening in Syria. I was simply there because before I thought I die, I want to give everything away in my life with my own hands. So I was simply in Turkey to give away, away everything, to give away all my possessions and what I owned. And I remember she's explaining to me what is happening to them, and I was like sitting there with no emotions. And then I met this boy, and he was only 7 and he had no legs. And he really changed my life 360 degrees because he said to me, no, I don't know, I'm not disabled. I don't have a disability. I'm very, very strong. And then he told me how he knows all his hadiths, like, which is a saying of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by heart. And he said, when I go to my school, and he said, I don't speak the Turkish language, but I speak Arabic. And he said, my teacher always asks me to lead the classroom with a prayer. And he was so full of confidence and what that I was put to shame. I remember. And I said, look at me, I have everything. I have health. I have everything. What am I doing? What am I doing? And look at him, what he's doing. And then I remembered why I wanted to be in United Nations. I always had a dream of seeing free Afghanistan, free Kashmir, free Bosnia, free Chechnya, Kosovo, because I studied the genocide. I was a student of genocide and conflict resolution. And I said, what am I doing? And I remember that was a wake-up call. And then when I went back to UK and I went back to Pakistan, I decided to live. Like I decided to take the charge, and I slowly things started changing. And no, there were no therapists, where I would sit and I would have food counseling, nothing. As I told you, there was no way anyone could tell me to do anything, everything, because I was a very, very extremely bad case. So that's when, the things started happening. They started changing my involvement, and then this whole website. And I remember when I came back to I had made a promise to God. I said to Allah, I said, in 2012, when I did start the website, I remember one promise I made to Allah. I said, if I start sleeping and I don't have any depression, dark thoughts in my mind, I promise you that anybody who comes to this website and asks for help, I will help them fi sabilillah, for you. And I would never, ever, ever, as long as I live, I would never, ever take any money for this work. I would do everything to help someone, because I cannot tell you the depression and not sleeping. For 4 days, you're not sleeping and your mind is so conflicted and you're begging for the sleep. You're begging God that you just want to go to sleep and you can't go to sleep. And nobody has an answer. The prestigious medical institutes can't help you. No one can help you. No, like homeopathy is working on you. And when I was dying a horrible death, I remember being on a holiday in Spain. We were in Barcelona, and 5 days I wasn't sleeping, and I was like losing my mind. And I remember there was a very, very strong sleeping pill, and they made a decision. My friend's husband, because he was a doctor, he said, we'll give her this sleeping medication. But when they saw my weight, they said, she'll die of a cardiac arrest if we give it to her. Can you believe it? You're not sleeping, and you're like, you can't enjoy anything. And your mind is so active, it's so speedy, it was unbelievable. And I remember that's one thing I wanted. And when I got that peace of mind, when my mind started calming down, and alhamdulillah, I still remember a few years back, something happened. And I remember being the strongest person in my family. I could lead my family forward, not like relapsing and, going to the doctors and begging them, give me, this pill and that pill, or calling the psychiatrist or breaking down in tears. That's when I realized the strength. And I said, you know what? No, we were created as a leaders. We are there to lead and not be limited by the illness and these thoughts in our mind. No one has a right to control us. And honestly, and we can't allow that. So yes, this is something. And the reason, I speak about my experience in Anoova, because, in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and all these countries, people don't have an access. And we cannot allow the fact we don't have these facilities where they lock us up and, tie us to the bed and, put us on the feeding tube, that we can't recover. We can recover. We just have to believe, work on what is inside us, and like really have a belief in God, and use whatever is around us. And I will say one thing, Anuva, I did try everything. Like, yes, I was a sick person, with deep illness. I did go through, I went through acupuncture, I went through the color therapy, I went through the light therapy, I went through the water therapy. Name each and every single thing I was trying on the side. I was, because the pain inside was really, really deep, and there was a conscious mind which wanted to heal as well. So yes,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just incredible that you're able to, that you were able to overcome all of that and now do so much work, I guess, in the field itself, and not just in eating disorders, but in all the other social justice issues that are going on in this region
yeah.
of the world.
I
Um,
think I knew what the
yeah,
main thing is. I have to add this last thing. I
hmm,
swear. I think yes, food was the issue, but
yeah,
the main issue was what came with the starvation was the dying mind. When your mind is dying and your body is
yeah,
like decaying, and you're getting like you're developing osteoporosis and you're developing everything. Yeah, I cannot even explain to you. When your heart is shrunk in the side and
hmm,
your organs are dying and your kidneys are failing, and then to overcome every single um, like what you have damage, and you do it yourself, and you do it through the natural ways like the food, allowing the food to become a medicine. But the main thing was to overcome what was in the mind, and never like and I swear, like other day somebody was speaking to me and we were going through this deep discussion about the anxiety, and I said, no, I never get an anxiety. I said, I never get anxious, I never get panic, I don't get those things anymore. I never. That sometimes I have to question myself, did I even go through the anxiety? Did I even have the panic? Did I even have the depression? When your mind is completely on one level and nothing is going through your mind, it's completely calm, and it doesn't matter what like comes in your life, even the situation, it doesn't matter how hard and difficult it is, even when you're losing the people in your life, right, left, and people are like, oh, but you have to go through the post-traumatic stress disorder. I said, I don't get it. I said, I don't experience those things. I said, because when something happens, automatically, because you're like meditating, you're praying, and you're relying on God. Sometimes, somehow, I don't know, in your mind, how to go through. Like as I said to you, uh, when I did start the process of going through the Islam, I
hmm,
realized that everything in the world was very limited. Like, international politics, how much can you study? Like, what is after PhD? Nothing. Yeah.
hmm,
Okay, maybe
yeah,
you write 5, 7 books. What is after writing 5, 7 books? Nothing, you know. But what was like, you need something in life which is really, really big. Yeah. Like
hmm,
which has no limitations, which is limitless, everything. Yet like even there was a limit to the illness. The limit was you die. That's it. That's it. You exceed the limit of going through the illness. The highest limit you can go through with your illness is you die. Yeah,
hmm,
that's
yeah,
it. But what was after that? So and that's when I remember when I was going through the Quran and I was studying and I was reading, I realized there was so much more. There was so much more, and that's what really gets you through everything. Like even like I'll be very honest. What is even happening in Gaza? What is happening in my country? Everything. And when I were everything, like you get the answers and you know how to go through with it. As I said to you, at the end of the day, Anua, we cannot look at our governments, we cannot look at the government of Bangladesh to make the profound difference. The difference, the people who are going to make the difference in the world are
yeah,
us. And we are lucky that Alhamdulillah, that Allah has given us that kind of awareness that we want to make the difference, and we want to create a difference. We want to, and the change doesn't have to come by sitting on the seat of corruption and trying to dictate to people. The change can happen from anywhere. Like your vision of how what you want to do with your work is great. I really respect, because the people who get eating disorder are not normal people. They are very, very intellectual people, and Alhamdulillah, once they realize their freedom, they realize their strength, they can really go forward in life and can really make the profound difference in the world. And not by, sitting with a fake seat of power. but by making the change, around them. And this is what we need to do. And we are very lucky that we can do this. And we don't have to look at, XYZ people and beg them, oh my God, put money in our country, or, oh, we are dying of this and that, give us money, and, begging them for the handouts. So no, we can just make the difference, and everyone just has to believe. But the key is, do not be limited by this illness, because you don't understand, it takes years away from your life. And that's like, well, I wouldn't even say the regret I have, because if I didn't have this illness, I wouldn't be where I am in my life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and if I didn't have this illness, I think I would have been in a very limited job, being controlled by the boss who would be telling me what to do and how to do my work. I would be in a very limited mind, in a very limited capacity, in a space of work. But whereas, human spirit is very free and it is unlimited, and it has the power to crush the mountains. This is what I believe. So I think, everyone is very free. So do not allow this illness to take everything away from you, because it will take everything away from you at the end.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with all that you just said. And I mean, essentially, what we're trying to do is advocate for a movement and advocate for others to understand that this is an issue, this is a serious issue, and it cannot continue to be normalized. It cannot continue to fall into the background when we talk about mental illnesses in general and just among all the other public health issues that are out there at the moment. And this, it exists and it kills, and people don't understand that it kills. I think it's just seen as a phase, or seen as something only girls are able to experience, only rich white girls are only able to experience. And what we're not trying to do is diminish those experiences, but broaden the narrative to include other people in the conversation
Exactly.
of who is affected, who can be affected, and how we can support each other by
Exactly.
uplifting our experiences rather than trying to minimize them and fit into the media's portrayal
Exactly.
of eating disorders.
And
So,
also the treatment, Anuva, like, let's be very, very honest. I mean, there's a country next to my country called Iran,
mm-hmm,
and there was a king of Shah of Iran, and his daughter Leila Shah Pahlavi, she was a princess. This is before the Khomeini revolution. There was a king of Iran, his name was Shah. And look at his daughter, Anuva, she had everything. She was all the riches, access to all the treatment, and she died in London in a hotel room, and her body was emaciated by years of eating disorder and depression and everything. So if sometimes people do say that, like, I'll give you an example. The problem is, like, in Algeria is one country where people, Algeria, sorry, where people really believe that if they come to UK, they come to
mm-hmm,
America and France and Canada and Australia, name it, they will recover because they have the facilities. And I'm like, no, don't believe in that. You can recover where you are. And, instead of like, and you just need to go and look, Anuva, and when you go and seek, you will find the cure. And
mm-hmm,
I'm being very honest, like I gave you the example of this 15-year-old girl from Singapore. Her mother was a working single woman in Singapore, and they couldn't afford the treatment, and they went to the India, and the whole cost of treatment was like $20.
mm-hmm,
Can you believe it? And she didn't get well. So you just cannot look at, I mean, if you look at this mental health industry, it's the largest money making industry. If you look at the
mm-hmm,
pharmaceutical industry, it is. And I cannot even tell you, like, there was one case, I don't want to talk about it. There was somebody who was literally dying. And when I did get in contact with their therapist, who was not like Muslim, they said, no, but this person has to give me the consent. I said, the consent to do what? I said, this person is dying. And I couldn't believe it. I really honestly couldn't believe it. And I said, you're limited. I said, your practice limits you to when it comes to the compassion to help someone. I said, this person, life is in danger. And then when they do use the intervention, like they used in the case of Britney Spears and Paris Hilton,
mm-hmm.
then they take things to the level where they completely destroy the person. So I think, we really need to believe in ourselves. And if someone is going through the depression, it's a valid what they're going through. So please help them get together, and they will overcome it, and they will rise on top, understand. And I'll give you one example. Anoova, I think I told you there was one very extreme case in Pakistan. I swear, before I came to Pakistan, I consulted like 6 7 people. Yeah, they were professionals, and it was a case of SA, like the sexual assault, so a very bad case in the childhood trauma, and it, progressed. It turned into something very, really, really sinister. And when I was consulting the professionals across the world, everybody was like, "Oh no, 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 no! She needs to leave home. She needs to seek shelter. She needs to do this and that." And guess what? Now that person, you can overcome that. I swear the brain has the capacity to heal and to move forward. And they're like, no, she will be stuck in the trauma for the rest of her life. She is never going to get over that. I said, of course she is going to. The soul can heal, the mind can heal, the body can heal. So why can't you heal from this? Of course it can heal. And, we come from the faith where we have many examples. We have an example of Karbala, what happened in the Battle of Karbala, how people moved forward. They were not stuck in, what happened in Karbala, and they were not going to make the contribution. All those imams, like the son of, Imam Hussein, he made a valid contribution. He witnessed the genocide, the mass murder. His own son, Imam Bakir, went forward. So, we have very profound examples, and we cannot allow this narrative that, if you experience something in your life, you will forever be reliving the trauma, and you're never going to heal, and it's going to be the part of your personality. And not just that, it's also going to be generational trauma that is going to get transferred into one person and second and third. So everyone has to heal, everyone has to move forward, and they have to find their own path. And all we can do is help them and support them and offer whatever is there, because we do need to live a healthy and good life. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me today and sharing all of that information and everything about your own experience. Um, I think it's very valuable to just try and get as much perspective on how different factors can influence one's experience and how it can lead them to such amazing paths such as yours, and to run such incredible initiatives trying to advocate for greater understanding of the illness and support, general support for the community as we try and fight through it. So, yeah.
Definitely, Nuva, and I really wanted to say well done. I honestly, and I'm not just saying it, like the last session you did and how
Yeah.
you spoke about your experience. I really want to close this session by saying that it really made a difference. People, like the way you spoke about your family,
Mm-hmm.
about your Bangladesh culture, it really taught people so much that how they can recover, how they don't have to use uh, like this whole um narrative about that they need to be seen by of course, if it's available, go and use it. But if it's not, then believe in yourself and try to do the right thing. Keep taking the steps forward. So thank you so much, because no one has really spoken about the family, the involvement, and with what happened with you, and especially you being so young. Mashallah, you're 15, and I really, it's so good to see someone who's doing so good, and to bring, yeah. So I think you're going to do really, really well. We're really hopeful. Yes, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Then I think that's all for today. And
Thank
of
you.
course, we'll continue to stay in touch about all of this and just keep each other updated on everything that's going on. And yeah,
Inshallah, definitely. Thank you, Anuva. Thank you for all the work you're doing. Thank you. Bye.
yeah. Goodbye.